Hi friends, welcome back. Sandi MacIver here, and today's color combo is Abandoned Coral, Dried Marigold, Rusty Hinge, Gathered Twigs, and Ground Espresso. I'm starting with the Hammermill White card, 6.5 by 8.5, and I'm starting with the lightest color. I'm going to work my way over to the darkest. And this is a new video in my series, Distressed Oxide Inks Color Combos and Cards. And today we're also going to bleach the image once we get it embossed over top of our ink blending. So I sped this up a little bit because it takes a little bit to cover this big of a piece of paper. You'll notice that I'm adding the ink in a circular motion, and you'll see that my first time around I do have blotchy spots and I do have white sticking out, but this is how I like to blend. I like to work my way across and get a base coat down. And then you'll see once I get to the Ground Espresso, I turn the card around and I'm going to add the Ground Espresso twice. So it takes a little bit longer here, but I work my way across and I come back a second time. And I find that when you come back the second time, it's easier to blend over the two colors, blend in the line where they join, and in the same time, it also fills in any white spots left over from the first go round. So I'm just getting it in here. It's good to have ink pads that are nice and juicy as well. So if some of your ink pads have dried out, try adding your re-inker back into them. That will help with your blending. And the image that we're going to be using today is quite large, plus we're going to be bleaching. So I'm not overly worried about a perfect background because the art piece is going to draw your eye into the image, and really I'm going to splatter some paint at the end of it as well. So I kind of want a blotchy background. I don't want it to be perfect. So the hardest color to blend for me seems to be the Abandoned Coral. It's the lighter color, and it takes a little bit to get it in there and go over top of that Dried Marigold. But I love those two colors together. Aren't they pretty? I'm really happy with this blend. Okay, so the next thing that you want to do is make sure that this is completely dry. Otherwise, the embossing that we're going to do next, the embossing powder, is going to stick to your wet ink and you're going to end up with little flakes all over the place. A good rule of thumb is to test your ink to make sure that it's dry, and I'm using the Wow Embossing Powder Decadent Ruby. This stuff is gorgeous. Just sprinkle a little bit of it onto your art piece and then shake it off and see if anything sticks. If it does, you need to heat set a little bit more. The stamp set I'm using in today's project is Simon Says Stamp Sunflower Garden, and it's from the September card kit. It's this fabulous, huge sunflower stamp. I'm using my Misty today to do my stamping because this is a very large stamp and I want to make sure I get a great impression. I'm going to be stamping with Versamark ink, but first I'm using my anti-static to make sure that all my fingerprints are off of this and I get a nice solid image without a whole bunch of embossing powder where I don't want it. Again, stamping with Versamark, and I have just re-inked my ink pad. You want to make sure it's nice and juicy and that you've got super good coverage on your stamp before you go and stamp it, and that's why you use a Misty, just in case you have to do it a second time. Okay, and I am really inking this up well because this is a brand new stamp, and I'm using my new stamping tool that Jen M sent me. Thank you very much, Jen. I'm enjoying it, and it just gives a nice even pressure all across the stamp to make sure that you get a good image. When these ones are this big, sometimes it's hard to stamp the middle of them, and so that's where that tool comes in. Super handy. All right, it's time to spread out the embossing powder, and I'm using two papers on this one because this is such a big piece of cardstock. But it's fabulous that you can cut it in half and get two slimline cards out of it. Okay, so just shaking it around and making sure I have good coverage. And I use a dry paintbrush to flick off any embossing powder that has decided to stick where I don't want it. One last little spot there. And then I'm going to heat emboss this. This Wow embossing powder, again, is called Decadent Ruby, and it has a combination of gold and ruby embossing powder in it. Mostly the gold shows up, but there's a little bit of the ruby in there, which makes it rather fabulous. I quite like it. I kind of wished it had stayed as dark as this, but I do like the gold once I'm completely finished the project. And I'm just holding it up for you so that you can see how it's turning as it's heat set. I love this technique. This is the very first technique I learned when I started stamping over 30 years ago, and it still impresses me to no end. I just love it. Anyway, there you go. We're heat embossing. Next up, pour yourself some bleach. I'm using that little canning jar, and I have my work surface protected. I'm also using an acrylic water brush. It's empty, but I don't want to use one of my good watercolor brushes for this technique. So you're just going to dip the tip into the bleach, tap it on the side of the jar, and just start coloring. And you'll see as you color, and I'm just going to zoom in here momentarily, as you start coloring, the bleach removes the background color from your image. And I'm going to go around here slow for a little bit, and then I'll speed it up, but I just want you to see how you go in there and do this. And the reason that you heat emboss is you give yourself kind of a little bridge around each of the image pieces, and it helps to contain the bleach inside. The same as if you're watercoloring and you want to keep it all in one spot. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat this morning. You'll also notice in the bottom left-hand corner my leaves that are kind of purplish. I'm not sure if that is a combination of the brush almost being dry and not getting a whole bunch of bleach on it, or if it's the color of the Distressed Oxide ink and some of the color's off, but not all of it, and that's the residue. But regardless, it's really pretty, and I think it's because my paintbrush was almost dry. So give that a try because you get some really cool techniques with it. This is so slow. But you get the idea, right? And you're just going to work your way around for each one of the images. Make sure that you have a window open or something, because especially on an image this big, the bleach smell can get kind of obnoxious, shall we say. Okay, so here's my image all bleached out. Isn't it cool? And it looks fabulous on that background, I think. So you want to heat set this and make sure that it's nice and dry. You can also paint over this if you want to. You can add different colors in once it's dry. But I was really taken with this, so I decided not to. Next, I'm using my distress sprayer, and I like to put it into my hands and then splatter it over the card because I like some big and some small. And I just clap my hands together and get a whole bunch of water on there, let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then just pat it dry with my paper towel. And that's the first part of the blotches for the background. Secondly, I'm going to bring in these Gamsel Tammy. These are the gem colors, and I really like the gold in this set, so I'm just adding a bit of water to it, mixing it with a good brush, and I'm going to splatter. And you'll notice I splatter two ways. I tap it with my finger like that, and I also tap it against my finger. If you go against your finger like I did right there, you get small splatters. If you do it the other way, you get big splatters. At least I do. So just a little bit of a technique there. If you want some big ones, don't knock it against your finger. You can also knock it against a piece of wood or the handle of another paintbrush if you find that it hurts your finger, because it does sometimes. And there's the gold really setting everything off. All right, so we want to heat set this again because we don't want to smear any of that gold paint. Here's the scary one. You're going to stick it in your cutter and cut it in half. Wham, just like that. And you have two cards. My card base for today's card is 7 by 8.5. On the 7-inch side, I'm scoring at 3.5, and that's going to create my card base. And flip your work paper over. You don't want any of that ink transferring onto your white card base. And I'm doing this on purpose. The front of my card is going to be all fall colors, but the inside of my card is going to be white. Okay, measurements. The art piece, I cut it down to 3 1/8 by 8 1/4. The brown is 3 1/4 by 8 1/4, and the persimmon is 3.5 by 8.5 because it's going to completely cover my card front. So I'm just adding some Simon Says Stamp tape runner to this. I like this stuff. It sticks really well. Just go slow when you're adding the tape to make sure that it sticks really well to the back of your cardstock. If you go too fast, it skips a little bit. And I like to put this back into my score buddy and use the corner to line everything up so that it gets on there nice and snug without any white showing. Give it a good press. For the second part, the art piece has been quite wet. We've got lots of ink on it, and then we bleached. So I'm going to use score tape for this. It's stronger, really strong actually. And as you can see, you just put it down and tear it, and then you take the release paper off and then turn and add it the other way. You'll love this stuff. It is so nice and sturdy. I also like to put one across the middle just so it doesn't wow out. So you have a nice flat card and it looks professional when you're finished. I like to turn my slimline cards sideways so that I can see that I'm getting this on evenly. And then again, I'm going to take more score tape and I'm going to attach the art piece to my card, making sure that the flip is going the right way open. There we go. And then I turn the whole thing over and give it a good rub from the back just in case I've got dirty hands. So there's lots of sentiments in this stamp set, but I decided to go with this little kit here. These are pre-printed sentiment strips. They come from Simon Says Stamps, and this one is CZ Design Sentiment Strips Reverse Birthday. So you have a whole card, and then what you do is you just cut it into strips, and I keep everything in a little cello bag just so I can go back and, use them from time to time. And right now I'm kind of auditioning them, seeing which ones will fit across the front of my slimlines. And I am out of birthday cards, so I'm in the birthday card building mode. So we're going to snip up a couple of these and we're going to add some foam squares to the back and attach them to the card. One more little tip here, add a black marker to the edge of all of these sentiment strips to get rid of the white. It gives you a really nice professional finished look to your cards once these sentiments are attached. The Sunshine Flowers card kit this month has a tube of liquid pearls in rose gold, which would look beautiful on this card, but I opted to go with some gold and brass colored sequins, and I just kind of spread them all over the card. There's bigs and littles, and just glued them all down. And here are the finished cards. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Underneath you will find a link to all of the products used, as well as a link over to my blog for additional information. And if you enjoyed today's video, please consider giving me a thumbs up and leaving me a nice comment. I really do appreciate those. And until next time, happy stamping and toodles!